Hello, everybody, and welcome. We caught Manu looking to the side at something, but hello, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of the Friday Football Social, or FFS, as we have been calling it. I'm very much looking forward to this one because I am not doing it alone this time. Last week, it was just me speaking into space, but this time I have my friend Manuel Veth from Transfermarkt. How are you, Manu?
I'm good. How about you? All good over there, Adrian?
Yes, everything is going very well. And everyone give a little round of applause for Manu for getting up nice and early to join us over there on the West Coast.
Fairness, I have to be up this early anyways for work. But yes, applause for me.
Yeah, applause for him anyways. We'll pretend that he did it just for us. So yeah, I asked you to ask us questions to field. And a lot of you wanted to know about German football, which makes sense. I'm sure you guys recognize Manu from the other videos that I've done on Borussia Dortmund and the German national team. So here we go. Let's get right into it. One of the first questions was actually from Philip Stoyanovsky, and it was surrounding the German national team, Manu. And he asked, they played much better during this international break. Now, the caveat being that they weren't the greatest of opponents, but they've labored against opponents like this before under Jogi Löw. So when it comes down to it, is it as simple as Jogi Löw bad, Hansi Flick good, and a change of atmosphere makes all the difference? Or were there further structural changes behind the scenes as well?
I don't think Joachim Löw was bad. I think it's just been too long. You know, like after a while, things become stale. You see it with all sorts of things. I find it really fascinating that we have an election in Germany in just a few days, which I'm actually going home for to vote. I'm very excited about to be able to go home next week. And I feel like it's the same. It's such an interesting metaphor for that, because like it is the case with the election in Germany, it feels like there's a wind of change coming. And there's always been an interesting parallel between the national team and what's going on in German politics in general. And I think it's just a mechanism of sometimes change is good. Sometimes players respond to a new input, just like people, in an election say, oh, we want something new now. We want to have change because things have been good, but things have also become stale. And when things become stale, you need to mix it up. And I think a lot of things that Hansi Flick did were very simple in these games. He basically freed up the players to play in the positions that they were the most comfortable with, away with this 3-4-1-2 system or whatever it was that Joachim Löw experimented with Euros that just did not fit this team, right? Because he was always overcoaching to paint over all the cracks that have been appearing over the long time that he was in charge. And Hansi Flick's he made it simple. It's like we're playing 4-3-3. That's the system that fits the players the best. And when you play against Armenia and Iceland and Liechtenstein, don't overthink it. Just put the best players in the best positions and play the football. And I think that's why it was so refreshing, because the players were like, oh, we don't have to think about tactics here. Yeah. We're just going to play it to the best of our abilities. And the best of our abilities is that we are like a top 5 world-class side. So we should be smashing these teams, which they haven't done. And I think, yes, of course, it's the expectations is that you beat Armenia 6-0, that you beat Iceland 4-0. That's the expectations. But we haven't seen it in the last 4 or 5 years. Like that would be a laboring 2-1 win or something silly like that, right? So yeah, I think that's really what it is. He basically went, guys, just play your football, and we're worry about all the structural changes as we go along, and that can be very refreshing. And I think that's what it did for the players.
Yeah, and it seems like based on the last 2 jobs that he's taken over, he almost has that's sort of his thing now. It's just to simplify things, just to make it simple for the players to play to their strengths, to play in a shape that makes sense for them, just as he did at Bayern Munich. And so let's jump to his former team, Bayern Munich, because there were some great questions from the community actually sort of surrounding them. So let's start with their current side. Now, considering their squad, the additions they've made, the players they've lost, the form of the players, and of course their new manager, Nagelsmann, there's some people thinking like, this is one of the best opportunities that anyone's had since maybe Kovac was in charge to grab a hold of the Bundesliga and make it their own. So if you had to guess, do you see that happening, or do you think that the other challengers haven't done enough to improve?
I personally think the opportunity has been there before Kovac as well. I mean, the Kovac years obviously were the best opportunity, without a doubt. We have to remember Dortmund threw away 2 Bundesliga titles, right? I think last year there was a great opportunity there at times as well. I mean, as good as Hansi Flick has been for this team, Leipzig threw away points at places where, you know, if they had them, then those 6-7 points difference could have been made up. So I think the opportunities were always there. Bayern has left the league a much wider opening than in previous years when, you know, Heinkes was in charge or like Pep Guardiola was in charge. I think there were opportunities there to really hit them. And for various reasons, the other teams around him haven't. And I think this year again, there is opportunities there. And I think it comes all down to consistency. If Borussia Dortmund can be consistent, then they have a very good chance at getting the title, because Bayern Munich will drop points. I mean, they dropped points in the opening. They were very good the last 2 games. I give them that, right? Although they did wobble against Cologne. We have to remember too, like they gave up a 2-0 lead against Cologne and really had to work for that. So there's other teams around them now that can hurt them. And I do think that the Nagelsmann period will take some settling in. I do think he's the right coach for them. And I think he's going to build a very good club there. But in the beginning, he will make some changes. Like he's experimented already with 3-5-2 way earlier than I thought he would. And that's been something that Kovac really fell on his face with, right? So kudos to him to trying it this early. But I think there will be openings there, and they didn't really address all the needs either. You know, like they did not bring in a new right back. They did not. They brought in Sabitzer as a midfielder, but Sabitzer, and lots of people have been crying about the fact that he went from Leipzig to Bayern. But Sabitzer wasn't necessarily going to feature for Leipzig under Jesse Marsch either, because he doesn't really fit his system, right? So it's a backup player in many ways. Sabitzer is not going to win or lose the title for either one of those sides, and so I don't think they addressed all their needs. Are they still top to bottom the best team in Germany? I think so, but I do think that there's opportunities there for other teams to hurt them. And if one of the other 3 big sides is consistent, they could win the title.
And one of those other 3 big sides is RB Leipzig, who actually plays against Bayern this weekend, correct? So let's look at that. Now, you mentioned it, and this was one of the questions that I actually had for you, was we saw that Kovac tried that 3-5-2, and it didn't really work for Bayern. And as you say, Nagelsmann has sort of played with the 3-5-2 as well, the 3 at the back, or 3-4-1-2, whatever you want to call it. But previously, he had mainly been going forward with that 4-2-3-1, at least at the very beginning of the season. So what do we think? Do you think that he's going to just revert back to the 4-2-3-1? Do you think that this group of players it's in their DNA to just stick to 4-2-3-1, or do you think he'll eventually sort of go around that corner with the 3 at the back?
I think that Alphonso Davies is built for 3-5-2. You know, he can play that role that Angelino played for him at Leipzig, just better even, because Davies is a way better player than Angelino. No offense to Angelino. I think Angelino is a very good player, but I mean, when you compare the two, this Alphonso Davies hasn't even hit the ceiling yet, and you know, there's still so much he can work on, and he's already at least on level, if not way better already. So and I think Davies would be perfect for that system. The question is, of course, do you have a comparable player on the other side, right? And Leipzig he didn't, and that was a weakness that they often explored. It's interesting. I spoke yesterday to a sporting director, so I don't want to give away too much because that interview is going to be on Gegenpressing on Sunday, so stay tuned. But one of the things that he pointed out is when they look at the AWS match facts that the Bundesliga provides, right? Because it's an official provider of the Bundesliga. You can see sort of certain teams are imbalanced. And one of the things that it's funny that he pointed out Leipzig, because they were imbalanced because they were very strong over the Angelino wing, but then they had some very structural weakness on the other side. So, and I think if he goes that route, Bayern Munich will have exactly the same problem, because Stanisic is not Alphonso Davies. Like there is not that attacking wing back available to them in that squad, unless he makes one, you know, like he goes into this team and I don't know. I don't really see anyone looking at the squad right now who could naturally play that role. But or maybe he finds someone in the youth setup. But right now he doesn't have a comparable play. I know they were looking in the market. They were actively looking. There was some hopes that Bouna Sarr maybe eventually could become that player, but that's never going to happen. So I don't think he has that option on the other wing, and so that would create an imbalance. And like some teams are like that. Some teams just stronger on one wing than another. So it will be interesting to see if he's going to go that route.
Yeah, against his former club, and it will be interesting to see Jesse Marsch up against Bayern. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm a fan of Jesse Marsch, but
yeah, so am I.
Yeah, go. And Metalfly brought up a pretty good question, actually. Speaking of the wings, Leroy Sané has had a bit of a slow start, and maybe not the Bayern career that we would have expected of him after his first season. What do you think is going on there? Because I know I saw some articles saying, like, time's running out for Leroy Sané. Do you think that he is also going to round a corner, so to speak, or what's going on there?
So internally, everyone is wondering this because he's fit. He's 100% fit. His fitness levels are as high as they ever been. His knee is structurally sound. When he is in training sessions and he plays with his mates on the training pitch, everything is fine. It's one of those things where he seems to be mentally blocked, and I guess that's going to be one of Nagelsmann's big projects, is to put him on the left wing, and maybe playing together with Fonzie is going to help him to sort of unleash that attacking potential. I think we've seen it a bit now over the international break, right? Hansi Flick didn't want him at Bayern because he wanted to sign other guys instead. Is now fixing him at the national team. This is what politics can do to a player, right? I mean, it was political to some ways because Hansi Flick and Hasan Salihamidzic did clash over this transfer, and now that Hansi Flick is sort of removed from the politics of Bayern Munich and needs him at the German national team, he's like, okay, well, actually now we should probably get the best out of him. And that international break was probably pretty good for him. And I think from what you're hearing from inside the club, it must be a mental thing. And that's going to be one of the big tasks for Nagelsmann to get him over that mental hurdle, to get him to unleash all this potential that we all know he has.
Yeah, it was definitely shocking to see him in that sort of form, because I mean, you could see it plainly in the starting lineups last season with Hansi Flick that Leroy Sané wasn't necessarily his go-to guy. He was often coming in the second half. But so I thought that maybe it was just a consequence of that lack of games, etc. But yeah, he certainly, if he can find that form that he was in at Manchester City, that would be stunning for them, and they could very much use that. So Sinful brings up this question. And there was another question that someone asked in another sort of forum, basically asking, does Bayern have enough to compete with the other sort of free spending sides in Europe? Are they going to be able to sort of catch up? Which is an interesting question because they didn't necessarily spend a ton when they were at the top of European football 2 years ago. Or last year, I guess.
It is an interesting question. They don't... It's really hard to compare them to, let's say, Manchester City or PSG, because there is no oligarch or oil-rich state that just will give them unlimited amount of money. Every cent is earned, and every cent they spend has been previously earned, and every cent that they spend, they have to earn back, right? Because of the way the club is run as a structure. So they can't just go, and in this time of COVID where stadium capacities are still limited in Germany, they can't just go and spend the kind of money that PSG did on a free agent like Lionel Messi. And people have to remember that there is no such thing as a free transfer, right? Like, these players, they get sign-on bonus. You have to pay the agents. You have to give them salary and all that sort of stuff. And Lionel Messi didn't just decide like he's going to play for free for PSG. Like, quite the contrary, it's a big money move. So they can't just go in and compete with that. It's just not possible. Like, they could, they could spend it all on one guy, but then they'd be bankrupt. And German football's structure and economic model makes that very, very hard. And so they always had to think outside of the box. They always had to find players in their own market that they could sort of push to become world stars with. And then Bayern very rarely go. Even the Leroy Sané transfer was was out of the ordinary because they wouldn't usually spend that kind of money on a player. So I think people just have to come to terms with the fact that this Bayern side is always going to be a mix of players that they find, like Jamal Musiala, right, who they poached from Chelsea's academy and then had them in their academy, and he's now quite clearly on a path of becoming a world star. And that is the sort of model that they are after. And it's more difficult, but of course it's also rewarding if you create players like that, right? So I think people have to just realize that they can't just go out there and just plug in a player from every possible club, a world star. It's just not going to happen.
No, I don't think that should be the expectation, especially with German clubs, as you said, with the various rules that they have there. And one final question on Bayern, as Samuel asks here: will Lewandowski, my goodness, actually leave Bayern next season? If yes, who will replace him? I don't know if we need to get into the replacement part of things, but based off of what you know or what you've heard, Manu, do you think that he will be with Bayern next season?
He always pushes for a move, doesn't he? I do think there's a curiosity there that for him to maybe try something new eventually. He also has an agent in Pini Sahabi who I think wants to make a little bit of money. He's in a long-term contract. If Bayern don't want to sell him, they don't need to. And why would they? Because the thing is, there is no ready-made replacement for Robert Lewandowski. There isn't. The only guy that could potentially replace his goal output is Erling Haaland, and he's not going to Bayern. He will be going somewhere else. I think anyone who follows me on Twitter knows where I think he's going, but he's not going to Bayern because simply his entire package, that's a deal where we're talking 40 million euros a year. That's not going to happen at Bayern Munich. Simply, it's not going to happen. So it's for them, that's the thing. Like if they sell him, they could take that money. But that money would be gone in a heartbeat by the moment you sign a replacement. So it's a very difficult one. And why would you sell a player who's under contract until 2023 anyways, right? So there is no need for them to do it. And I personally don't think they're ever gonna sell him unless they feel that they have a ready-made replacement in hand. That replacement is not Erling Haaland, so it has to be someone else. Or if they think that his goal output is no longer going to match his salary and that they can actually make money, and it makes economic sense. And we'll have to find out, I guess, next summer and see whether any of those factors are in place. But right now, the form he's in, they'd be dumb to sell him. And dumb people don't run Bayern Munich, so they won't. They're very smart. They rarely make mistakes. Like, and if they make mistakes, the mistakes are in a financial category that they can fix them, right? So that's the thing. They don't make mistakes. And this is anyone in German football who says that. It's like, oh, we always have to wait for Bayern Munich to make mistakes. The problem is the people that run that club very rarely make mistakes. So it's like, well, and selling Lewandowski for below market value, if he still has a goal output, that would be a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for those, I know you mentioned it, just for those who don't follow you on Twitter, first of all, your Twitter handle is
at Manuel Veth.
Perfect.
So my name written together. And
where is it that you think Haaland is going next season?
I think he's going to Real Madrid.
Yeah.
That's all the indications that everyone has been getting. I think that's been always the plan. It's why Chelsea made this big offer and it went nowhere in the summer. I know there's some people at Twitter that went at me for saying when I very early on said Dortmund A not going to sell and B he's not going to Chelsea. I spoken to some people around him who say he's because he's already had a few issues with his knee and they're just worried that Premier League football would end his career early. So that could change. I mean, his agent is Mino Raiola. Mino Raiola likes money. I know. I saw that comment too. Sorry. You guys just signed Cristiano Ronaldo. Come on. I think he's going to Real Madrid. And I think Mbappe is too. And that's Yeah, that's the next question right there.
Yeah.
There is a good chance we're going to see Mbappe and Haaland play together next year, which is of course insane, but that's Real Madrid for you.
Yeah. They were sort of the sleeping transfer giant for a little bit here.
Yeah,
they've taken
loading
time
up.
off. Yeah, they're loading up, and now
Chelsea did the same. Chelsea
Yep.
did exactly the same thing. They were in the transfer ban, and they're like, everyone's like, well, last summer everyone couldn't spend but Chelsea, so they brought in Werner, they brought in Havertz, they brought in Ziyech. They did exactly the same thing. They loaded up, and remember, Real Madrid are opening their new stadium next year, so
yeah, they want to have all these new shiny new toys to fill that stadium with. All right, well, let's jump away from Bayern and away from Haaland and Mbappe, etc. We had a question that I'm actually very interested in hearing about. But Enter Phil asked this question. He said, "Do you think Union Berlin?" Do you think that they have staying power in the Bundesliga now? Do you think that they are a team that will continue to rise up in the Bundesliga? I know they're in the Conference League now, which is very exciting for them and their fans, but do you think that they'll continue to excel?
They're doing a lot of things right. And I know the stadium project has been very interesting. The fans have been one of the first to push for fans being back allowed into stadiums. And I think they're doing a lot of things right. And the people that run the club, some of them are controversial figures for one reason or another. For some fans, I tend to stay out of that kind of stuff. But I personally think that they do a good job. And I do think that they have staying power. Berlin is definitely big enough for two big teams. It's a very big city. It's actually kind of surprising that this hasn't happened earlier, that we have two Bundesliga teams in that city. So I do think that they have the staying power. And, when you look at the plans, they want to expand the stadium to, I think, 45,000 seats, most of that standing. So they will have to have some interesting plans for when they do play in Europe. But yeah, I can't see why not. I mean, as long as you do a lot of things right, which is what they do, I think they showed already in the start of the Bundesliga season that they've done quite a lot of things right too. And I definitely can see them being a long-term member of the Bundesliga.
It would be really exciting. I think a lot of us sort of got enraptured by the story of the club and how long they had taken to get up into the Bundesliga. And we have a fellow German here, Leif Järvinen, asking, wait, hang on, wrong one. Here we go. The important question is whether Hamburger SV will ever play first league football again. What do you think?
I have to be careful with this one. Our Transfermarkt headquarters are in Hamburg, and the Hamburg fans. I think I just tweeted like a few minutes ago in a thread that I was doing with Stefan Bienkowski and Kara Head, two other German football specialists, and I was saying it's actually kind of criminal how badly run the teams in cities like Hamburg and Berlin are. And yes, I know Berlin has two teams in the Bundesliga, and yes, I just praised Union Berlin, but they're kind of like the natural counterpoles to Munich, right? The one of the big reasons is why Leon Goretzka and Joshua Kimmich, for example, didn't go to the Premier League is because it's just way nicer to live in Munich than in Manchester. Sorry again to everyone who's from Manchester, right? In big German cities, like there's a lot of other German cities that don't have that pole. Like Dortmund has those issues that it's just not a glamorous place to live in. Same with Gelsenkirchen, right? But Hamburg and Berlin are glamorous cities. Those are places that people want to live in, and those clubs, Hamburg SV, have been doing a terrible job for many, many years. And they are giant in Bundesliga too. They have by far the largest budget, and they just can't get out of that league for whatever reason. They usually butcher it in the last 3 or 4 match days, right? And so I think I personally can't wait for Hamburg to be back in the Bundesliga. Manchester is nice. I've been there. It's nice and close, direct train connection to London. That's fantastic. I think Hamburg needs to be back in the Bundesliga. It's Germany's second largest city. It's a great place to be. The downtown core is world class. Right. I'm very fortunate to go there all the time because of our office, and it's a shame that stadium, Volksparkstadion too, is a beautiful stadium. And then of course you have St. Pauli as well, right on the Reeperbahn. They every once in a while make it in the Bundesliga, and it's just a perfect location to have a big club in German football, but for one reason or another, that potential is just being wasted away.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. And speaking of which, we've had quite a few questions, including Tim 1904. Speaking of Schalke, Schalke and Werder Bremen, we had many questions surrounding whether you think they have done enough in the second Bundesliga now to come right back up, or do you foresee them sort of kicking around in that league for a little bit?
Well, the Bundesliga or lower German divisions are full of clubs that should be doing better. Hamburg and Schalke. I mean, the start hasn't been great, right? Werder Bremen, 8 points out of 5 games. Hamburg, just 6 out of 5. And I'm looking at Schalke. That's not been a great start either, 7 points. So the reality is that the Bundesliga 2 is always a hard place. The reality of Bundesliga 2 is always tough. Teams go down there and they think they can bounce straight back. I experienced this with my club. I grew up an 1860 fan. We went down and we all expected that we would come straight back up because it's going to be easy. And now we're in the 3rd division. You know, it can happen quickly. Kaiserslautern is another example. Kaiserslautern used to be one of the biggest clubs in German football, and they're with us in the 3rd division now, right? And a lot of it is, again, structurally because of the way the teams are run. And Hamburg and Schalke are 2 of the biggest membership clubs in German football. And Schalke has had a ton of issues last year and the years before. Like, it didn't just all break down for them last year. Like, this thing doesn't happen overnight. I mean, this is years and years of mismanagement. And they have to do some really tough rebuilding. And it's not automatic that you go straight back up. And Schalke is in a city, Gelsenkirchen, that is structurally very comparable to Kaiserslautern economically. So there's not going to be a lot of people out there who are just going to pump millions and millions and millions of euros into this club to rescue them, right? I mean, they're already lucky that Gazprom didn't jump ship. So it's not automatic to go up. And especially because you have other teams down there that have done very well. I mean, Regensburg has been fantastic, for example, but you know, just look around you. There's Nuremberg in there. There's like Hamburg is in there. Werder Bremen will make a big push. Dynamo Dresden are in there. You know, there's Holstein Kiel have been, although they're kind of at the bottom of the table, but they have had experience toying with promotion, right? So it's like, it's not automatic, and this is going to be hard work for Schalke, I think, this year. Yeah.
It's I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. They have the 2nd most members out of all German clubs,
behind Bayern, just ahead of Dortmund. 190,000 members.
Yeah,
big club. I mean, they're bigger than the teams in Spain. They're bigger than, I think, one of your clubs, Benfica, right?
Yeah.
What is it, like 200,000 members?
I couldn't tell you. Miguel in the chat will be able to tell you, that's for sure. So he'll give us the update. But nice. Yeah, a lot of members. Yeah, formerly the Guinness World Record holder. I don't know about anymore.
It's Bayern now.
Yeah.
I think 350,000. Yeah.
And speaking of Bayern, we're going to have to go back to them because Noah Black dropped a donation here. And he says, does Bayern Munich's domination of the Bundesliga hurt the product? And this is an age-old country that I have seen you field so many times on Twitter. Is, you know, Bayern's quote-unquote poaching of talent hurting the competition of the Bundesliga? What do you think? What's going on here? Is it just a food chain like every other league, or what?
It is a food chain. It happens everywhere, for sure. I think what's different about Bayern and the other clubs is, and people like to poo-poo this, but it is true, Bayern are at the very top of the food chain. You know, they are at the top of the food chain, just like Real Madrid and Barca. I guess Barca no longer, but you know, they were in that category of teams that could just go and knock on someone's door, and players would go there because you win titles every year. If you play at Bayern Munich, you're competing for the Champions League every single year, right? You win the German Cup, you win the German Championship, you win titles. And at the end of the day, that's what players want. They want almost a guarantee to win titles, because when they retire, that's all everyone talks about. It's like, how many titles have you won? So they are on the very top of the food chain, and I think the problem is that it is hurting the product internationally because people look at the league If you're just starting to watch the Bundesliga today, right? Or if you're one of those many Twitter followers that come at me all the time because saying this, and don't actually watch the league, and there's most of them don't. I don't care what you're saying, because if there's some of the comments give it away, you don't watch it. But you look at the league, and this is what these people do, and I don't blame them for that. They look at the league and say, "Oh, who's won the league the last 9 years?" And it says Bayern, 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 Bayern. You're like, okay, well, that's not very exciting, is it? And then they don't realize that some of those races were actually quite close, right? But on a first glance, that's bad. You don't want that. You need competition. You need that needs to be broken up. I don't think anyone would complain if, say, Bayern won 7 out of the last 9 titles, or like say 6 out of the last 9 titles, but they were like other title winners in between, and every title race was close, and they had to it was always very exciting. And that's, I think, where internationally the product is hurting. And I speak to the DFL all the time. We had Robert Klein, the head of Bundesliga International, on our podcast to start the season, on Gegenpressing, right, to talk about this very issue. And he said, yeah, of course, they would like to have a title race. It's not like the league can stipulate a title race. It's not up to them. They can't just go and say, Bayern, this year you're going to roll over and let someone else win. That's just not how it works. But of course, they want a title race. Internally, within the Bundesliga, this is not an issue, because everyone supports their own club. I support 1860. I worry mostly when I'm a fan, when I'm not a journalist, when I don't write for Transfermarkt or Forbes or whoever, and I don't speak about the league, and I just go with a beer to a stadium and watch football. That's when I go to 1860, and I only care about the result there, and I only care about what my club does, right? And that's what most fans in Germany are like. If you're a fan of Borussia Mönchengladbach, you know at the start of the season you're not competing for the title, because that's not where you're going to end up. You competing for the Champions League. You want to have a top 4 finish, and you go to the game because every game is exciting for you, right? Now, if you, let's say, I don't know, support someone like Union Berlin, you want to fight off relegation. So like you don't necessarily even worry about all these other things. If you Borussia Dortmund, then it's a different issue. Like you want to win the title, right? Yeah. And you haven't in a while, and that can be frustrating. So I think within the league, within the fan bases in Germany, where there's a lot of big clubs, a lot of these teams have like hundreds of thousands of members, they don't care. So within Germany, the product doesn't hurt. But internationally, if you want to sell a league in North America, where we're used to having different champions in all the different leagues that we have here, it can be difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, the only Mr. here, this is a great opportunity to say, listen to Gegenpressing podcast, the Bundesliga podcast, because you guys have had some great guests on. Like you said, the head of Bundesliga lately, you had Raf Honigstein on there as well. You have a mystery guest coming up that is going to be very
excited about it. Very excited about it. Yeah.
Yes. So the only Mr., that's definitely a good place to start if you want more German content. Now, let's jump out of Germany completely, because another question that we got had to do with CONCACAF. And as the area manager, the North American area manager for Transfermarkt, you do follow it pretty closely. So let's talk a little bit about these recent qualifiers, as it feels like there's been a little bit of a power shift in CONCACAF. It's not so much just Mexico and USA fighting to be number one. I mean, after the Nations League and the Gold Cup, you could maybe point to the US still being number one. But Berhalter's side, I mean, they seem like they've faltered quite often. It hasn't been as smooth sailing for them as perhaps they would have liked. Perhaps some of their talent that they boast would suggest. So, I'm biased. you know who I'm pulling for. But do you see a world where, I'll just be forthright with it. Do you see a world where this Canadian team finishes ahead of the US in these qualifiers somehow, some way?
We still have the home match against them.
Yeah.
You win that, you probably want to finish ahead of them.
Yep.
Then you have the head on head competition is one. And that's not last game on Canadian soil, Canada won against the United States convincingly.
Yeah.
And I think we've been better since. I know that in the US they kind of look at Canada and they're like, well, we're losing to Canada. That's a travesty. This should never happen. And then you actually look at the comparable market values, and those teams are actually pretty close at the moment. Like I think they're slowly waking up to the fact that the neighbor to the north is actually pretty good at this game as well.
Yep.
And I think Mexico is kind of slowly waking up to this fact too. That it's like I was actually at the Pacific FC game yesterday, and we were talking about this in the media section. We're like, to get used to the fact that we're actually good at the sport now.
it's a weird play. I mean, I was, not to name drop, but I was speaking with Jimmy Conrad, and when we were watching that game from the other day against El Salvador, and I was saying how it is very hard to get used to watching a Canadian team that is actually good, that can actually compete and isn't losing 8-0 to Honduras and teams like that. So it's definitely uncharted territory, at least for someone of my generation.
Well, I think it's going to be really interesting because maybe I just look at I have the stats all in front of me, and then like a win against El Salvador is not surprising. I mean, I know CONCACAF is all difficult and all that, and other teams have struggled there, but when you just look at where our players are playing and where their players are playing, and like the level of competitions that some of our big stars face, and we have probably the two most talented players in the region playing for Canada, like, of course we should beat them. Like that's a given. Like this shouldn't even be a 3-0 shouldn't be surprising. Yet that was the biggest win that we ever had over El Salvador. So I think people are still shaded by the fact that, oh yeah, this used to be hard. Yeah, but it's like we have a talent pool now we're only skimming the surface now, because we have so many professional football teams now in this country, right? That the talent pool has grown so much over the last couple of years, thanks to the Canadian Premier League, which is, by the way, a really good league. If you haven't really watched it, it's good football, and it's helping this country enormously. And I think we have to kind of get used to the fact that beating El Salvador's 3-0 is normal now. And I wonder what was going to happen when other people when the fan base wakes up to that reality and realizes, this is actually normal now. And what happens when we like draw them away 1-1 to El Salvador, and all of a sudden people are like, this is not good. We should be like, what happened? Like we're only about maybe a year or two away from being Americans. Yeah. Where we're like, true. Where we're like going to be just as critical as they are. And we probably should be. We should be asking this program should be qualifying for the World Cup. This is not a maybe. Like when I look at this, just from the numbers that we have, and when you look at who else is in there, Mexico and US, they have a better talent base than we do. But then the only other country in that region is maybe Jamaica, right? So we're competing with the US and Mexico for one of the top 3 spots, and the only one who could become really dangerous is Jamaica, because Costa Rica is not what they used to. Like they don't have a good generation at the moment. So we should be finishing at least in the top 4. We should probably finish in the top 3. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when there is a couple bad results, because right now John Hertmans is everyone's darling. But I personally coached by Greg Berhalter in the first 45 minutes in the US game. And we relied on someone's individual brilliance to get us across the line. That was Alphonso Davies, right? And people were okay with that. I talked to lots of people that have followed Canadian football for years, and they're like, that's a great result. And I'm like, it's a good result. It's not a great result. It's a point on the road that this team had to work harder for than they should have. Because when we go down to the States, like we shouldn't expect a win, but we should be in the range of winning this game, because the gap isn't that big. And I think that's a lot of people will have to wake up to that reality. And it's going to be interesting to see what it's going to do to this program, because people will ask tougher questions of this program. And I think we have to ask tougher questions of this program, because there's a lot of problems with this program that I still think are out there that need to be addressed.
I think so too. And I think, what you were saying about that sort of the expectation and how it needs to shift. Just a year ago, when Canada beat the US in Toronto, everyone was celebrating it. This is such a huge achievement. And then when they went and lost shortly after to the US, I believe, or it might be in the summer
4-1, like I think.
Yeah, they go and lose, and everyone was just sort of like, oh, well, we had that first game and they fought really well. This is still an improvement, which I guess, we still are moving in the right direction. But that mentality that you were alluding to, the expectation of we should be beating these teams.
And that result was actually bad. Like that result was really, really bad, because without COVID, we would not be at the stage of qualifying now.
Yeah.
Right. That result basically closed the door on getting into the final stage of qualifying. And if there hadn't been COVID, we would have never gone from, 6 teams in the final stage to 8. So, that result was actually really, really bad, because when you win 2-0 at home and then lose 4-1, like we lost the head to head. And that should have never, ever happened. That was a massive failure by that program. And it wasn't the first one, because like just months before, that result against Heishi was in the Gold Cup. That should also have never, ever happened. And there's still some structural mistakes that you still see with this group. And we kind of lucked out in this country that, we have the CONCACAF president as Canadian. So there was an interest there to get Canada there. But talent-wise, yeah, we're there. But I think there's still some issues on the coaching level that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I think so too. I'd agree with you there. And let's start to wrap this up here. Tim is asking, how do you rate the chances of the 3 hosting countries in 2026? This is looking way into the future, but if we sort of looked at the trajectories of all of them, we're seeing Canada have more and more talent playing in Europe. Tejan Buchanan just left for Club Brugge, or is going to in January. Yeah. Alphonso Davies is there. Jonathan David, Kyle Larin. We're very, very good depth in our striker area, actually.
Which is key.
Which is key. It's an area that we had struggled for a long time. You look at the USA, you look at Mexico. In fact, here's the question for you. Do you think that the Mexican program has stagnated a little bit? Because there was a while where it felt like, they were the ones that had all these players over in Europe. They were the ones that were looking dominant. Do you think that they've stagnated or plateaued a little bit recently?
I think we kind of lucked out with MLS. And people will be going up in arms over this, but because MLS is willing to sell their best players to Europe. And Liga MX is terrible at exporting. Like, just terrible. They're just really bad at it. Like, because they pay their players really well, because it's a very good league. So I don't want to poo-poo Liga MX at all. I think it's actually a very good league, and I love watching it, but they're terrible at exporting. So MLS and all the teams in MLS, they are way better set up to develop talent and to move that talent on. Like, there was never any doubt that New England would sell Tejan Buchanan to Europe. It was just a matter of getting the right price. But it would, a Liga MX club would have probably asked twice that much, and then that player would already be on $1 million salary, which makes it not very attractive. Like, a Belgian club would just not go for it. Period.
Yeah.
And once you are in Belgium, those teams are equipped to just move on players. Like Jonathan David went to League A, right? And Tejan Buchanan is going to be there for a year or two if he does well, and then he's going to be in one of the top 4 leagues. So, that's just so different. I mean, we see it with the US as well. He's going to be in a top 4 league by next year, because like he was from MLS. You can make the step to a parallel league in Europe. And MLS is not going to stop you from going there, because the Austrian Bundesliga is a parallel move. But then you're in Europe, you play Champions League, right? And then from there, you can make a move to a big team. Liga MX doesn't do this, or they do it terribly. So a lot of the players are staying in their program. And Mexico is probably the country that has the most underperformed given their population base. And considering how important the game there is, like it's like a state religion, right? And how good their league is. But they do badly at World Cups, like way worse than they should, considering what they have in terms of quality on the field. So it's a really interesting question. I've been wondering this about a long time, and I think simply because Canada and the US will have a lot more players in Europe by then, playing in key roles at big teams and big leagues, they might have an advantage at this stage. And you're already seeing it. Canada's best players play for teams that compete for titles, right? In the very best leagues. And in the US, it's the same thing. I mean, Tyler Adams is captain material at RB Leipzig. Giovanni Reina plays for Borussia Dortmund. Christian Pulisic. I mean, everyone knows I'm not the biggest Christian Pulisic playing at the highest level. He plays for Chelsea, a Champions League team. And you don't have that for Mexico. there is, they don't have players in key roles at teams that compete for the biggest titles in the world. And I think they might have to look at this and change it, but I don't think the big teams in Mexico have interest doing that. So that could hurt them.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you don't have, like you were saying, a Chicharito who was at Manchester United for a while, or any of those sort of players. And it definitely does feel, like a Canada going up against Mexico a few years ago, even 5 years ago or something like that. No chance. There's no chance. That's going to be a rough watch. But
now we can get a result.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at the Gold Cup. Like, I mean, like a little bit of luck that goes further. And then, it's not like, I was in Vancouver a few years ago when Mexico came here. And Canada got destroyed, like absolutely smashed. Like, the result didn't even reflect what was actually on balance on the field. And now you look at this in Mexico coming to Vancouver, because like that's a possibility. You're like, yeah, we should at least get a point.
Yeah,
like that has to be the expectation now. And I think Mexico is still going to win this group, because I do still think that they have the best quality, but. It's not a given for them to come to Canada anymore and just collect. Like, we used to have to just, we used to be just mailing in the points against them. That's not going to happen anymore.
Yep, absolutely. It's and it says a lot when how things are sort of shifting and how people are sort of paying closer attention to Canada. When you have something like Herculez Gomez, for example, saying that Alphonso Davies is by far the most talented player in CONCACAF, and to not even put Christian Pulisic in the same level as him, which. I mean, I'll just leave that as it is, and I think
it's true.
We are definitely impartial.
Like, Fonzie is not even close to his ceiling yet. Like, there's so many aspects of his game that he needs to develop. His first touch, his instinct of running into the right spaces, his ability in the air, his decision making are not even close to develop yet.
Yeah,
and can't be. He's 20, but like. That's just crazy. Like, the ceiling is so high. Yeah. So yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think that Herculez Gomez got that one right, but
usually does.
Manu, he's usually pretty good when it comes to his analysis. But I want to thank you once again for taking the time, Manu. This has been a lot of fun. And where can everyone find you and all of your projects?
Yeah, easiest is to just follow me on Twitter. So that's just my name spelled together, Manuel Veth. We have a really good podcast on the Bundesliga Gegenpressing. So you can find that anywhere you get your podcast, be it Spotify, iTunes, I don't know what else is out there, Google Play or whatever. Like if it's a podcast device, it's on there. We do all things German football. We've been doing it for 5 years, so this is not just like a Raj project. It's been something that's been going on for a long time, and it's been developed. And like as of this year, we've been able to get some really big name guests on it, which has been really exciting for us, because I guess we now hit that point where we're being recognized. And of course, some other German podcasts have no longer exist. So yeah, give that a listen. It's all things German football, Bundesliga mostly, and with some really great guests. So check that out. And then of course, my bread and butter is Transfermarkt. Transfermarkt.us if you're in North America. So that's like the entire CONCACAF region. We do mostly transfer stories, but now that the transfer window is closed, look out, we'll get some interesting interviews up there, some game stories, not necessarily match reports, but interviews around matches. So yeah, some exclusive content. So yeah, check that out as well.
And I co-sign on all of these things, especially the podcast. I was listening to it on my bike ride down the canal here in Montreal the other day, listening to you, Raf Honigstein, and Chris all together. It was great. I loved it. So anyways, thanks you once again, Manu. And thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you to the moderators for keeping it clean in here. And we'll see you guys next week for another one of these FFS. These are fun, nice and relaxed, just a good way to get into the weekend, finish off the week, I guess we'll say. So thank you once again, guys. I'm Adrian, and we'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.
Cheers.